Hospital workers, serious, what regrets do you hear from dying patients? He wished he had been a better father to his daughter. He wished they had reconnected. His dementia prevented him from remembering they had reconnected years before and that she visited often. I wish I could have made him aware that he had accomplished his last wish. But he died not really understanding that. In the it's not something most people see coming when they arrive, but it's usually the same regret when they are coherent. They all wish their family was there, which sucks even more lately with COVID since family can't come in initially. Or they cry out for their so in a panic. It's gotten to the point recently where we tell them, "So is right here with you." The look of relief on people's faces just hearing that gets me every time. People just want to not be alone at the end. I worked as an oncology nurse right out of nursing school. I was barely 21 years old. Had a patient about my age who was dying of lung cancer. A few hours before he died I sat with him and he was telling me how much he wished that he would have had more time to maybe fall in love, marry, have kids. He was so young. He asked me to call his parents and he died shortly after they arrived. It was awful. His regrets were more about the life not lived. Many older patients had some interesting life stories and most wanted to tell them before they died. Most were at peace with the life they lived. Many regretted working so much and not spending enough time with family. I was a hospice nurse. One of my elderly patients had skin cancer, a huge malignant melanoma on the side of his neck that was growing rapidly. He had been a farmer all his life and never married. One night we were talking and I asked him if there was anything he wished he had done differently in his life, and he thought about it a minute and said he wished he had worn a hat when he was farming. I wish he did too. Paramedic but close enough. Made a run on a woman in her 30s for shortness of breath. Her and her boyfriend had just moved into an apartment together. They were fighting over something trivial, which room to unpack first or something. He thought she was just being dramatic. We transported, she never made it. Went from awake and talking to unresponsive and asystolic, no cardiac activity, in a matter of seconds. They were so caught up in a little argument that they never said goodbye. They never told each other they loved them. She didn't have any last words. And honestly that's even worse. I never heard a specific spoken regret, but when my dad was fighting stage 4 lung cancer, his whole attitude changed. We spoke so often. I'd moved across country and we'd never truly been close before. But he called every couple of days. He asked so many questions about my life. He told me he was proud of me. He was so proud of me and my brother and my sister. He was proud of the risk I took packing up my life and moving to Texas. He passed away 2 days after that conversation. None of us saw it coming. Projections were that he had another 6 months minimum and the chemo was going well. But looking back, I think he knew. I miss him so damn much. I think we both regretted not simply being closer. Edit, fixed a word. I've worked in long-term care for over a decade. I can't speak for the young, but most often old people regret the things they didn't do. I was a new nurse, flying solo. We got a call for an incoming trauma, woman in her 50s involved in a multi-car accident. We were already at the ambulance bay, unsure of the woman's complete condition. She rolled and breathing on her own, but very labored with asymmetrical chest expansion. She was profusely bleeding, had multiple deep lacerations, pupils blown, debris covering most of her, etc. Her vitals were unstable, she was circling the drain, we knew she was on the verge of coding. I was standing near her head, ready to assist in supporting her airway but also providing comfort and doing my best to calm her. The woman looked me directly in the eyes and in a hoarse, labored voice stated, "I was angry, I told her I was disappointed in her." She began to cry, her vitals plummeted. "I'm sorry," was the last thing she said before her heart stopped. We coded her, intubated her, performed round after round of ACLS, only to eventually have to call time of death. I still see her face at times, her eyes filled with more emotional pain than physical. It took much longer and was so much harder to write this than I thought it would be. I work in a hospital. Whenever someone is at the end of their life, they always just want to be with their loved ones. Any regrets I've heard is always family related. They wanted more time with the people they love. Most people are at peace with things though. People also tend to wish they took their health seriously. My grandpa passed away when I was around 12 from a brain tumor. My mom and her brother were outside the hospital room talking to the doctors, and I was alone with him, and we were just chatting. All of the sudden, he got real quiet, and looked at me and said, "Sublieutenant, never let a vice be an escape from reality." The look in his eyes, I will never forget the pain I saw in them. And #X200B, my mom had been drilling it into my head from a young age that I should never gamble, because my grandpa had an addiction, would lose entire paychecks playing cards. She grew up in small towns, and my grandma only worked part-time as a nurse. Seeing the look my grandpa had, I could tell how much pain he still lived with, knowing that his addiction caused his kids to go to bed hungry some nights all those years ago. I did training to be a CNA, and we had to work in a nursing home as part of our training. I didn't really get into any deep conversations with the patients there, but I can say this: if you have family in a nursing home, please visit with them. It's a sad and lonely place to be. My mother-in-law, her husband, stepdad to my husband, would not leave her alone in the hospital for 1 minute. He is a controlling, crazy man. My husband was visiting and somehow she convinced his scrapdad to go take a break. She pulled my husband, her son, close and said, "I don't want to be kept alive on machines." Her husband was her power of attorney, so my husband had no power. She was kept alive way longer than needed. I think, in the end, she regretted trusting him. AEMT here: most patients that I see in my ambulance are too sick to talk in these cases, but one sticks with me. Mid-40s male called us for chest pain, put a 12 lead on, and he was in the middle of a massive heart attack. For those that know the term, he was throwing tombstones. Sad part was he had medical training, so he knew that it wasn't good. We were screaming to the hospital. He looked me dead in the eye and goes, "I should have ate that ******* cake." When I asked what he meant, he told me, "F what others think, if it makes you happy, do it. Eat the cake, pet a squirrel, take a nap. F anyone else, it doesn't matter." He crashed shortly after we got to didn't come back. Now at least if I want to do something purely for the fun of it and my wife asks why I want to, all I have to say is I want to pet the squirrel. There is a great book about this topic, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, https://bronnieware.com/blog/regrets-of-the-dying/closing parenthesis. 1. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. 2. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. 3. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. 4. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. 5. I wish that I had let myself be happier. My mom did home health and hospice. My stepdad was very abusive, and my mom would take me to work with her to try and protect me. She didn't want to leave him due to religious beliefs. That's a different story. There was an old man. I'd play cards with him. We'd talk about working on the farm we had. He was a nice guy. He figured out I was being physically abused. His health started declining and he couldn't play cards or get out of bed. The last time I saw him, he said he was sorry he wasn't younger and that he couldn't help me. Almost 25 years ago, and I still remember him. End of life physician here. CPR. No, seriously, hear me out. Imagine using your hands to crush the sternum down 2 inches repeatedly of your 90-year-old grandmother who weighs 90 pounds. So that maybe you can then put her on a ventilator from which she might never get off alive. We ask this of everyone who comes into the hospital, but too often it's asked more like, "Hey, if you're drowning, do you want us to save you?" Rather than what it truly is, especially for those who most likely won't survive it in the first place, and if they do will be significantly worse off than they were before they died. The survival statistics for patients with 1 to 2 significant comorbidities with an in-hospital cardiac arrest is like less than 5% to leave alive, and then 30-day survival is 5% of that original 5%, if I remember correctly. I cannot count the number of times families were adamant on having it done to their loved one only to then see what it entails firsthand and beg us not to do it again.